What's going on, brother?
I am doing spectacular, my man. It is Monday. We are happy. The month is at the end, man. Today's the last day, the 31st. What's going on with you, my man?
Oh boy, I just can't believe how fast time's flying. Like,
Yeah.
and it's, I don't know, it's crazy how, I don't know, it's just wild. And I'm realizing I got stuff on my driveway and it just started raining out. That's just interesting. That's
There we go.
interesting.
Fun, fun, fun. It's
Yeah.
it's that time. It's funny that we'll get into our topic, but it's kind of cool because it's that time where, hey, anybody who's been prospecting January, February, brand new clients, hey, that if you did the right thing, which was follow up with them every single month, then you're in the right track. But if you haven't, and they told you to call them back in 6 months, then hey man, you better be polishing off that calendar and making some value. But you're definitely against the curve if you weren't prospecting and sending them a follow up every month. But this is the time, Dan.
Yeah.
We're getting into RFP season just now. Like I'm excited.
It is, and it's funny because I think it's a no better time to discuss what we're going to discuss today. And that is, as the title says, next steps theory. And as I get more and more back into sales, right? Because for almost a year, over a year, I haven't sold, right? Just focusing on my health and recovering and really haven't sold. And it's funny because something so simple as, when's the next time you want to speak again?
Mm-hmm.
Or when can we follow up? Or, like getting a prospect on a call is the goal, right? That's like the endless striving is just get them on the phone and qualify them and find out, who they are, what are they doing, why are they doing it that way? And, the next steps theory that kind of helped me a lot in my sales, and I'm relearning it now, is never hang up the phone or the video call until you understand what the next step is.
Mm-hmm.
Because it eliminates so much confusion, so much frustration, so much, like, it just gives you so much clarity. Oh, well, you know what? Not this week. So don't try and call me back this week because I'm on vacation from Wednesday to Wednesday. Right. And then you start calling on Wednesday, and for a week, they don't get a hold of you. And you're like, what the hell? Did I say something wrong? Did I do something? Did I piss this prospect off? And so just understanding what that schedule is for them and when you want to talk to them and what the conversation is going to be about.
I couldn't agree with that more. I think, this is the part everyone kind of talks about this. I quote this quite a bit, so it might be a little bit annoying, but it works for me. It's just like the three F's of follow ups, right? There's that what the follow up, the follow through, and the follow back. And that's something that
Mm-hmm.
was kind of written down in the Ryan Serhant, Sell It Like Serhant, one of the really, really famous like real estate moguls of the US. But, for us, that next steps. And for me, when I don't know about you, Dan. I don't know about anybody else who's watching, but when I'm able to book a meeting, like we said, like shortly, what I do is that I don't ask my qualifying questions on that first initial call. That to me is kind of like a booking a meeting, a call. So when I get to that scheduled meeting, we both have it in our calendars. For me, it's really important. I kind of know what the flow is going to be like, right? We ask those questions, and then it's always going to be like, hey, these are the lanes we run, and we always end off the call that, hey, my call to action is that I need to get some rates on these certain lanes. It always ends like that for me. There's never a time, unless they say like parcel or something like that, then I'd be like, okay, well, I don't do that. I don't really know anybody in that space. I'm not going to go through it. But I want to say 99% of the time, it's always going to end with me having to do some homework, get some rates, put some things together. So in that, it's not just like, hey, let me get some rates and I'll send you an email and then get that follow up. And then you're kind of waiting. Just like you said, Dan, with your customer kind of going Wednesday to Wednesday. And then, hey, if you don't have anything on the schedule, then they're going to ghost town, my man. Like, you're like a ghostbuster at that point, trying to find them because that was where the controllables, what you could have controlled, you lost it. You kind of
Yeah.
dropped the ball there. And having that scheduled calendar there. And Dan, let me ask you this, because here's what I kind of see on my end getting back into this. Just like for everybody who's watching, Dan and I are not special. We're prospecting just like everybody is. We're going through the same calls. We don't have I wish we would call a prospect and they would answer, "Oh my God, Ryan from Sales Chatter. How can I give you all my business?" It does not work that way, by the way.
No.
But one thing that I've kind of noticed with customers is that when I kind of set up that schedule, the next schedule meeting, but then they get that alert that 15 minutes or the day before, something pushes that, and then you're looking at it right now, and you've got 3 canceled meetings, and it's not your fault or it's not there that they're dodging you. It's just that other priorities have come across that. Right. So, Dan, what is something that you kind of do to kind of deflect that? And, a lot of people will say, oh, just forget about them. But, we've had so many shipping managers on this show. To think that you are importance to that shipping manager, especially when you're completely brand new and you just literally caught them at the time that maybe they were expecting a different call. Maybe they're at their desk doing paperwork, working with bill ladings and stuff like that, and they're like, "Oh, the shipping, somebody else was supposed to call me, but you called me, and then okay, fine, I'll book a meeting to get you off the phone." But getting back to it, Dan, what does that look like to you? Because it happens to all of us.
Yeah. So, um, and again, retaught myself, but on the phone, if there's any kind of objective for us, like rates or whatever, I always start with, if I do this, will you do that? So if
Mhm.
I get your rates by noon tomorrow, when will you be able to have a chance to look at them? Because again, I want to make sure I'm following up accordingly based on their schedule, right? And secondly, if anytime I have a meeting booked, if it's a meeting where when I book it, it's kind of like, you're not really sure if the person wants the meeting or not. I'll send an email or a text the day before, and
Mhm.
I'll say, I'm so excited to talk to you tomorrow. We've kind of had this, and this happen since the conversation. So we've had three pretty cool things happen since conversation. Can't wait to tell you about it tomorrow. And I try and ramp up the curiosity, only so they'll show up. So it'll give me a good opportunity to have a scheduled call. Because you're right. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'll try and qualify if the person gives me the time on an inbound call. But most of the time on an inbound call, I want to get on and off the phone as fast as possible. And
Mhm.
I'll tell them, I want to get off this call as fast as possible with respect for your time. I called you out of the blue.
Mhm.
So unless you happen to have 10 minutes to chat or 5 minutes to chat, I just want, I want to take up 30 seconds of your time, see if this interests you, and see if we can schedule something.
And I love that. And I think that is such like I love. Okay, let's break that down a little bit. You sending that
Hmm.
message like the day prior, or even like 15 minutes or anything like that. Anyone who uses a software like Calendly or like uses a different software for booking their meetings and managing their calendar, they'll automatically do that for you. But I think it's so important for us to like send that touch. Send that email touch. Don't make it a phone call because at the end of the day, why would you call them the day before you're going to talk to them on the phone? Might piss them off a little bit more, but just like, ramp up that curiosity and don't exact. I love that you said that. You talked about A and B. You don't necessarily say what it is so that they can be like, oh, I just want to. It's kind of that curiosity. It's like, Ryan, let's meet up on Friday. I got something to tell you. Rather than,
Yeah,
hey, Ryan, tell me the story, and then can we meet up on
yeah.
Friday? Then it's like, well, you
Hmm.
kind of told me the story, and then you might be overhyping it. I might underplay it and things like that. So next steps, Dan. Let's look at that from like a pipeline basis from everybody that's kind of looking at here. When you're going through those next steps and you're going through that qualifying prospect and trying to get to base one really of what you're trying to get your customer to fulfill it and become a client, what is like for you, where does it kind of break down sometimes in the next step and we lose that lead or that prospect?
When I don't ask them, every time I've not asked, okay, for you, what's the next step? Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, for me, the next step would be this, and this. What do you see it as? And every time I didn't ask them, I lose. And
Mhm.
when I say lose, not necessarily lose the business, but I'll give you a prime example. I had a really big deal and I never asked the question and I hung up the phone and I made the proposal. Nothing.
Mhm.
Sent an email. Nothing. Sent a text. Nothing. Like, oh my God. And then I start questioning what I said during the deal making process. Oh my God, and to the point where I was about to send oh my God, I'm very sorry if I've upset you in any way. And then all of a sudden I get an email and he's like, hey man, sorry, I forgot to tell you that I was off the grid for a week fishing.
Mhm.
Never told me because we never got into the fishing conversation. It was, yeah, get me this and let's talk. And I never asked when. So if I would have said, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll get you this costing structure by say tomorrow at noon. If I get it to you tomorrow at noon, when are you going to be able to look at it? That's one step in the next step.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're going to be able to look at it by next Wednesday because you're on a fishing trip. Perfect. Why don't we schedule something for Friday? Perfect. Let's
Mhm.
do that. Now I don't even have to make the follow up call. I know exactly when we're talking next and what we're talking about. So I'll put that in my schedule, a primary objective, secondary objective of the meeting. And so I have on my screen as I'm doing the meeting, my primary and secondary objective. There's zero complications, zero like confusion as to what you got to do. But it's when you don't understand, okay, in their process, right? So say, for example, something as simple as rates. Well, you give me rates, then I need a day or two to go over all of my rates of my carriers to see who's best, hypothetically, right? So if you don't understand that, and you don't have a chance to say, okay, well, when you're talking what's more competitive, what do you mean by that? So do I have
Yeah.
to like beat somebody by 5%, 3%, 10% in order for you to give me a chance? Do I have to match rates? Where do I need to be? Like, you have no opportunity to say that. So you're going in blind,
Yeah.
really. And so, you know, in that example, I would go in at probably the margin I want. Like, I wouldn't go in at a super high margin because he said plural. I'd have to check my rate, so it'll take me a day. So, and I mean, this is obviously a hypothetical situation, but check my rates. It'll take me a day. Okay, so that's not just one supplier's rates. He's got like probably 4 or 5, and he's gonna have to mix and match, and he's gonna get disturbed, and then mix and match and disturb. So I know I'm up against say 4 or 5 people is what I'll assume.
Mhm.
And so I might cost structure differently. Okay, when you say that, and when somebody gets rates, what's the process, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect? Do you kind of award a single lane with high volume if they do things properly? So I'll quote it according to that as well. But if I don't know any of that and I don't ask the questions, then we're always blind. And then when you make that, before you get off any call, you should always have that next step. Like I've always said, as soon as you make contact, you should always know what your next move is. Always, always, always. And you should always schedule it with the prospect. So for one, I often say, you know what, my days get so jammed. I want to make sure that we pencil in some time. Can you spare some time? Because I'm sure your days get pretty jammed too. Say Wednesday at 2 p.m. Right. And then I believe, anyways, that it's respecting my time and my prospect's time.
Yeah.
Now, 2 p.m. doesn't work. What about 11? Okay, let's do 11. And I don't know. To me, that's the way you keep in contact with a prospect. Otherwise, you're calling, hoping they pick up the phone. And then you're right. 2 weeks later, they have no clue who you are again.
Yeah. And coming back to that, one of the big things that I remember this anytime like I interviewed for a job, Dan, was that hey, if you're in that let's say they really like you and you're really gonna get hired for the company, they always ask you if you have like anything happening in the next 90 days. And I've started using that, not started, but I've been using that for a while now, especially on my discovery calls, just to kind of get to know them as well. Like figure out, like you're talking about the fishing trip. It's like, okay, is there anything in the next 90 days that you're really looking forward to, or you got vacation or something like that? And kind of base it off that. And I feel like the discovery call for me is at least getting to know them. The second, third, fourth, fifth call is kind of like really about their business, but the first one's kind of getting to know them and understanding like the next steps and understanding how they operate as people and operate as a business person. Because I've seen this, everyone has seen this, right? You're working with a client, you're talking to them, all that stuff, and then boom, they're like, I think I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to go to a different company, and then you're like, oh my god, I got to start over the process again, like to retrain with everything. And I agree to the point that you said, having everything next schedule. That really is high performance, like having everything scheduled and to the T. I kind of operate kind of a little bit differently. I don't necessarily have everything scheduled. And my reasoning for that is I think it's based on my personality too. I don't like to have anything like completely structured. I like it to be a little bit loose. So some of the conversations that I'll have, like even like, hey, like after I got the first call, like we'll get you rates by this. I'll still keep in contact with them, but it's not a hard line. Like I don't do like a hard line, like a RFP. RFP, you can't miss it. Even if you miss it, you can reach out to them and maybe get a little bit of extension or something like that. But I like to kind of, I don't necessarily look at a prospect and think like, okay, I'm gonna start work with them in like 30 to 60 days. For me, it's like whenever it kind of happens, it happens. And that's
Yeah.
where I've kind of learned from not being that transactional kind of broker to that like lifelong customer, right? It's just like for
Yeah.
me, when I was a transactional broker, we closed them in like 30, 60 days, start doing business, everything's good, we're chilling, everything like that. But the customers who weren't receptive to that, they were like, oh, well, we have a certain cycle that we got to wait for. You got to wait 6 months, like truly to get through the cycle and everything like that. And I'm like, why would I need to work with a customer that takes me like a year or two to get in with, right? I think somebody we had on our show a long time ago, they said that like what they became the logistics manager, and then there was this one carrier who was literally knocking on the door, I think for like 10 to 15 years, always knew about them, everything like that, and they finally gave him a chance after 10 to 15 years. For me, when I hear something like that, I'm like, okay, well, was it worth that time? Was it what's worth my time and my day? And I think when you're talking about next steps and operating one step ahead, I think you got to make your plan, like Jeff talks about creating an action plan, but not really necessarily like having an action statement or action plan deliberately. I like to kind of do my cold prospects in the morning and then my warm and hot leads in the afternoon. I think that just works for myself completely better. But Dan, what's some things, like you said, you're getting back into it, and I want to kind of pick your brain at this for anybody who's new, because they're probably going through the same thing as you. What are some things that you've kind of learned getting back into the sales game, that you were like, hey man, it's definitely different, not necessarily before, but like the way that you kind of conducted or operated business in the past?
Yeah. So you kind of brought steps into your personal day, into your managing your time day, on how you do prospects in the morning or the afternoon. The next steps theory is specific to prospects and calls. And whether the prospect has a 6 month period where it's kind of like, this is the process, I want to know every step. I only want to know my next step in that process.
Hmm.
So for me, the next step theory is in every single piece that I do. Right? You talk to a prospect. It's okay. When are we going to talk again? Right? And so that's what the theory is, as opposed to just saying, I'll get you some rates. It's like, okay, if I get you rates and like I get them to you this week, when do you want to have another conversation? Because then otherwise you're just calling, hoping to catch them again.
Mhm.
Right. And so for me, I'm finding with my prospecting these days, um, everybody's wanting to schedule.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like over the top, way more traction on scheduling than anything else these days. Um, I even had one prospect come back to me and say, you know what, man, like I'm nowhere even close to ready for 3 months. And it wasn't even, I'll get back to you in 3 months. It's like, okay, perfect. Would you prefer before, after this date? And does morning or evening or afternoon work better for you? I'll pencil you in at this time. How does that sound?
Yeah.
And that was all in one email. And he came back and said, perfect, let's schedule it for that time. So I sent him an invite for 3 months out.
Hmm.
Now, I'll follow up with him in between, but I haven't really had a long conversation with this person. So I'm going to have to be very picky about my follow up. Maybe something to do with their company. You know what I mean? But for me, even 3 months out, I was like, when do you want to speak? Now, will that day move? Probably, Ryan. Like, we'll get to that 3 months and they'll probably say, who is this guy again? Like, okay, what was it about again? But I'll be, a week before, I'll say, hey, listen, we haven't spoke, we connected 3 months ago. Here's what I was looking to have a conversation about, and I'll bullet point it.
Hmm.
Is it still something that's on your radar now? Because I want to do that before I get to the meeting, because I can replace that time in my agenda with something that's going to be productive.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
it's like every Sunday I sit down and I look at my day or my week, and I say, well, that can be pushed because I booked that 3 weeks ago, and that really, I'm not there. I was
Hmm.
there 3 weeks ago and it sounded interesting, but I've kind of moved on to something else. So I got to move that out of respect for their time and mine. So they can put a prospect that might be buying in that slot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, so for me, everything revolves around, what are we going to do next? Like if you
Yeah.
look at us, right, what we're doing with the show, with the business, with the team, it's like everything's about the next steps. Every Monday when we get off our call, we know we have something to complete during the week, and next Monday we're going to get back on. It's a standing call, right? Standing call with the dev team, standing call with you and I. So it's like we always know what that is, and what, for the show, what's the next steps,
Yeah.
right? And full transparency, this morning when we were figuring out what we were gonna talk about, I was like, okay, well, let's talk about this, because this is what we're lacking on this show.
Mhm.
is the next steps, planning 2-3 weeks out so we can advertise for it or put it in
Put it
people's
there.
ears. And yeah.
And I think, like, you know what, the one thing that I get from that, Dan, from everything you're just kind of saying that I resonate with so much with is protecting your time. And
Yeah.
protecting your time and energy. Everyone talks about your energy, you got negative people, just don't do that. But I think, like, protect, like, for me, what I'm dealing with right now is just like, my time is going to, like, my prospects. My time right now is like our company that we're working on putting in that. And it's just like when I look at this show, it's just like, do we have the time for this, right? Like, do we have the time, even though people think it's like a 30-minute show, marketing, everything like that, and it can push viewers? It's just like, what are the priorities, right? And I want to bring that back to your clients right now. Like you're saying, if your prospect says, hey, I'm not going to be ready for 3 months, still look at that. Still look at that and understand, okay, well, this is going to be a time commitment from me, but let's go to let's keep that ball rolling, because I'm not just going to wait on that one domino to drop and then wait, like, it's like waiting for 3 months. Like, let's call it spade a spade. When we're dating, like, I don't know, back in the day when I used to date, you never had one prospect, like you kind of made sure that you had other things kind of going on for yourself, or when you're trying out something brand new. You don't put, they always say, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? And I think, like, you kind of spread yourself, a bit far in terms of that. So, I really am a big fan of what you're kind of saying. Even this morning, I won't share it on here, but like, I made an August contract. So I wrote down in Word, I made my commitments, what I'm going to do every single day, and I printed it out and I signed it. And I put it on my wall here. So,
Yep.
for reps who are looking out there, like, understand, do the same thing with your clients. Understand each client is going to be a commitment of yours. Whether you're making 5 calls a day, whether you're making 10 calls, you're making 100 calls, doesn't really matter. And stop comparing yourself, because that's what I see on LinkedIn all the time. People are always like, I'd rather have 10 quality conversations than, having 100. But people don't know that person who's dialing out those 100 calls, they're closing more business. Or the ones who are saying that, hey, I've got so many loads, I got a brand new customer every week, but it's just like, hey, if I can book one shipment, I'll make more GP than you did. So there's no comparison. Comparison is the theft of joy that we always say. But the message that we're trying to give here, as we're kind of going through, is, operating that at one step ahead. Start doing a lot of role playing. Understand, know your customers too, and that really comes down not necessarily to your ICP, but kind of like your avatars of your customer, of people that are like the same things that they're gonna say. Because I don't know about you, Dan, but I feel like everybody kind of says the same things. So I'm easy to like handle objections as they come along, especially. And the reason why I'm bringing up this topic is like when I'm talking to them and they're like, I'm really busy, I'm busy, even when you're trying to book, because we're going to get pushback. You're going to know the kind of vibes that you're kind of getting. So if you're getting pushback and booking in the next steps, I would say operate like a yellow light. Don't opposite at a red light. Some of my best clients have come from red light customers. So in terms of like, they tried to throw everything at me, and that's when I was able to kind of prove myself and prove my value to them. So I think with every client out there, you should definitely go with a green light, but keep going. Figure out what your steps are going to be, and don't sit over it and mull over it. Just understand, like, like, just like they have so many customers that they got to deal with, they probably don't have like a favorite customer. Customer's a customer, the ones who pay the checks. Maybe they like the ones who pay within like 15 days or something like that, right, Dan? Not the ones who are 90-day pays. But I'm just a big believer, kind of go with what really works for you. Set up those new schedules, set that up in your calendars. There's nothing, some people get intimidated by this, Dan, but I love going into my calendar and seeing, crap, I got like 4 or 5 things today in my calendar. Let's make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I listen. The hours during the day are to better your, at specific times a day are to better your career. The hours at other times are to better your life.
Yeah.
So there's always a season for everything. And if you're sitting here staring off into the sunset when you should be closing business, and then you're thinking about why you didn't close business when you should be staring off into the sunset.
Woo!
And yeah, I mean, we've all done it. All of us have done it. This is why on Friday nights, a lot of us are like, "Oh, Monday, man, I'm coming in strong," because you screwed the freaking pooch all week.
Yeah.
But and here's the thing. So let's look at this from another angle, right? Before we end today's call. So in life, you're always thinking of that next step. Hey, what are we doing this weekend? It's Wednesday.
Yeah.
What's on tap? Before we turned on, you were like, "Oh, next weekend we're doing this, this, and this."
Mm-hmm.
So not only do you know, sometimes during the week it gives you that light of energy because you have something on the horizon to make you excited.
Yes.
We sometimes have those weeks.
Well,
So imagine doing that with every single prospect you come in contact with. Like once you connect, once you once you have a conversation, everything's scheduled. And even if it is as simple as next Wednesday, how's 2 p.m. sound? Yeah, call me around there. Can I send you an invite? You know what? I don't do very well with invites. Okay, so I'll give you a call then. Like it's fine, but you have it in your agenda to call. You understand what you're going to do next, right? Like it's a part. Like we don't just wake up one morning. Well, some people do. Hey, let's go on vacation for a week today. It's planned, right? Like, and I don't think we plan the next steps with our prospects as well as we should. Like, I'm telling you, the golden moment is when you catch them and when they're willing to have a conversation with you. And Ryan, whether it be you're just trying to make an introduction, whether it be the next guy trying to get rates and understand operations, whether it be the next guy trying to close the sale in one call, the gold is still when the person picks up the phone or replies to an email or replies to a DM and opens a line of communication.
Yeah.
And to me, that line of communication is the most important part of sales. The most important. I don't care what kind of slick routines everyone thinks they have or what rebuttals they have. If the person's not willing to open a line of communication, it will never even start.
Yeah.
So to me, you want to communicate with me, I'm going to make sure I don't miss one of those communications. And I'm going to make it seem like, because time is the most important thing for us and for our customers. And I personally think, and I could be wrong, there's probably customers out there that are yay and some that are nay. To me, if I respect your time wholeheartedly, I think you'll respect the conversations we have more.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Right. That's just the way I think about it. But I mean, some people might just, some people might be like, yeah, sort of, but I don't know. I just, if I appreciate what you have going on and I understand it and I don't try it. It's like somebody saying they're not interested in saying, well, what about this? How about this? What about this? I'm not interested. What about this? What about this? Right? Like you've been on those sales calls too. And it's like, somebody's trying to sell you Norton antivirus or something. You know what I mean? Whatever. I mean,
they're so good. They're so good, and I think one of the big things for me is that one of the best experiences I've kind of had as I like to relate this just like you're kind of talking about to like my own purchasing, like my own buying experiences, right? For the most part, now that we got the internet, right? We got the internet, we could research, do all the reviews and all that stuff. But remember back in the day, you kind of go in. I worked in shoes, and having those qualifying questions and people asking me like, okay, like, hey, I need some shoes, like, and kind of qualifying them through that and understand the next steps so you can kind of qualify yourself to understand what the customer is going to really look like. And that's really important for our thing in logistics sales. People don't understand, like, when you're selling the software, that's it, right? Like that's a one-time buy, and you can have reoccurring customers, all that stuff. But in our industry, it's relationship based, right? So it's going to be something that is reoccurring customers every single month. And for me, what I like that you kind of said, Dan, was like, hey, I'm gonna respect your time, because if I respect your time, you're gonna respect mine as well, and everything that's kind of going on, whether it be like, hey, right now the big thing that I'm seeing in our industry everywhere else is like, massive layoffs, quality of life kind of going up too. So like, ask that too, because like I feel like for myself here, managers are probably doing like the jobs of like 4 or 5 different people right now. They're just not doing their job, right? Like we've had somebody on here too just saying that, he's wearing the caps for every single job, every single thing. So respect that, understand that. We only get like 40 hours. These guys are probably putting like 45 to 60-hour weeks. Respect their time, they'll respect yours. And like we said, man, do your homework, man. And everything we're talking about here is like really about controlling the controllables. You control when you're going to call back the customer. You're going to control the outputs that you make. I think in our development chat, one of our people said that, like he doesn't measure like customers that people bring on, because like that's not in their control. But the action, the outbound, the amount of conversations that they have, the amount of quotes, the amount of conversation they're having with the ops, those are things that you can control. So when it comes to the next steps, make sure you're just controlling what you can control. If you say you're going to call somebody back at a certain time, make sure you do it. There's no more, there's no time to be like, hey, I forgot it, because that call that you missed, you better believe Dan or I probably called them, you know, and moving next steps with
Mhm,
them or somebody else at that point. So
mhm. Well, and not only that, as a sales rep, I think it puts to ease a lot of the BS we put in our own head, right? Like, if you look at it and well, this person's not getting back to me, you start getting that. Am I as good as I used to be? I thought we had a great conversation. Why aren't they getting back to me? Why aren't they picking up the phone? Because you have no idea what's going on in their world. And yes, you might have had a great conversation, and when they end up picking up the phone again, you're probably gonna have another great conversation.
yep.
But as Ryan said at the beginning, you're not their priority right now, so you become the priority. And all that is to just simply say, like, just understand what the next move is, because when you create that next move, and all of a sudden, in a week and a half, you're calling it back, you could have avoided 2 calls in between
Yeah.
that were just a waste of time.
I
That's
couldn't
it.
agree with him. I couldn't agree with that, man. Like I said, my biggest takeaway from today's conversation is like really like really protect your time and your energy, and call the people and do what you got to do on your end, but don't mess up, man. And I think that's the one thing that people get lost in. Like
Just
if
don't
on
mess up.
well, I'm just saying, man, just don't mess up, man. At the end of the day, man, it's so easy. Especially like I understand it. I've been working from home prior to COVID. I understand it. There's that times where hey, I want to go see Jack Ryan. By the way, that show was amazing. I started watching that on the weekend. Holy crap,
Great
that show
show.
is really good. I love that show. But anyways, come back to it.
Are
It's
you
just
only
like
on the first season?
no, I finished. I watched the first season a long time ago, and I watched the second
Okay.
season this weekend. I'm on the third season, but like the second season reminded me of like Narcos. I love that like Mexican cartel, even though it's Venezuela. I love
Yeah.
those kind of story. Anyways, but besides the point, control what you can control and just have
Talk
some
about a
fun. And
squirrel. You went off on left. You took a
I love
pretty
that.
big
I
off
love that
ramp
show,
there.
man. That show's awesome.
Yeah.
It's great. So for myself, and it's a talking point as well too, right? So be human. Don't go through a list of questions and all this kind of boring stuff. Like once they say this, then say this. So just freestyle it, my man. Have some fun. Pull the Eminem 8 Mile and go for it.
There you go. I love that. I love that. That was a mic drop, brother.